And you're rolling, so whenever you want to start.
Great.
You, in fact, are rolling. Okay, cool. Great. Thank you.
Okay, the last few people are finally arriving to the best workshop of the whole time. We are going to follow the advice of President Clinton and build capacity at the community level for sustainability big time. Okay, my name is John Coonrod with the Hunger Project and coordinating something called the Movement for Community-Led Development. And I'm really pleased to introduce our colleagues here, Amy Coughenour, who's the COO of NCBA CLUSA, which she'll describe very shortly. Rebecca Nelson, who's with a group known as America Solidaria. She's executive director for the US branch of it. And Susan Wong, who's the lead senior director for the World Bank's Community-Driven Development Global Solutions Group, the most important part of the World Bank. This session, as you may have read, is designed on a Davos format. So it will be a conversation, and I hope that all of you will join in this conversation because the hidden agenda here is I want all of you to become very, very active champions and leaders for the kinds of issues we're going to discuss today. So I'll start just by giving a short overview of the Movement for Community-Led Development. It starts, really it was born with a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. On the day that Mahatma Gandhi was killed, he left behind a note on his writing table. And that note said, whatever action you are contemplating, think of the face of the poorest person you've ever seen and ask yourself whether the action you're contemplating will restore that person to control over her own life and destiny. So I always think of this young woman, girl actually 15 years old in Mozambique, her baby on her back, another child on the way, scratching out a living for herself and her family on marginalized land, no voice in the decisions that affect her life. And if she is going to enjoy the fundamental human right of participating in governance, that governance needs to happen within walking distance of her. So if there isn't responsive, strong institutions within 6 miles of her, they don't exist at all, and there's zero opportunity for her to exercise that fundamental human right. With the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, many of us fought hard to ensure that community-level action, strong communities, were part of the SDGs. There was also the recognition in the SDGs that the goals of the SDGs are at their root interlinked, and that only integrated solutions can solve those interlinked issues. And by our analysis, at least 12 of the 17 SDGs require integrated solutions at the community level. So, and that isn't the prevailing mode of development assistance. Most development assistance continues to be siloed, top-down, and not necessarily building sustainable institutions at the community level. Goal 16 explicitly has 3 critical little words to this movement: build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels, which we believe must start at the community level. The Financing for Development Addis Ababa Agenda, paragraph 34, recognized that countries are moving responsibilities and some public funds into the hands of local communities, but that those institutions need greater capacity, and the international community committed to increasing international support for building that capacity. We haven't seen that happen yet, but it's something we want to fight for. There are two ways of thinking, two different discourses. Susan heads a group that has a very broad definition, an approach that gives control over planning decisions and investment resources for local development projects to community groups. That has a large overlap with another discourse called community-led development, which is the process of working together to create and achieve locally owned visions and goals. CLD works to achieve systemic change rather than just short-term projects. So these two are very similar, but a lot of our focus in the NGO community is on building those institutions, both in civil society and local government. So for us, it's not just community-based projects. Nearly everything you'll hear from our panelists includes a profound transformation of mindset, never using the B word. Anyone know what the horribly shouldn't be said aloud in the development world B word is? You're exempt. Anybody have a guess what the B word is? You've probably seen it in 1,000 proposals. Oh, this is participatory development. Beneficiary, that's right. So swear, before you leave here, we'll have you sign a special thing that says you will never write that into a proposal again, because these are citizens, they're key authors of their own development. These processes typically espouse a clearly articulated set of values, including gender equality, human dignity, inclusiveness. It's a structured process of building up confidence and leadership over time. It mobilizes volunteerism, develops their leadership, is not just about problem solving. Most of the organizations that are members have discovered in their own journey that while problem solving is important, it's not a strong motivator, and that if communities can be in touch with their own vision and their own strengths, that's a stronger motivator for community action. Multi-sectoral integrated approaches, building both local government and local civil society, and really is intent on sustainability, as President Clinton said, so that you've built the systems that are there forever when you exit. So if we want that to happen everywhere, we have this very simple theory of change. All of us who are mobilizing communities need to get on the same page. We need to be able to really work strategically to ensure every community has access to this approach. If we're going to do that, it's going to require real partnership with the national government and with their development partners, and that's going to take a lot of advocacy. So these are our members to date. If your organization's logo isn't up there, we want it up there. Come speak to us later. And we're starting national chapters because ultimately, the advocacy for national programs of community-led development have to be fought for by the people in that country. And so we're building national chapters in as many countries as we can, as quickly as we can. As you see, just with the 42 members we have so far, we have staff in every developing country and every OECD country. So, with that, we'll start this conversation. And the first question, and I'll go from my right to left, your left to right, starting with Amy. What's a good example in your experience of how NGOs are partnering with local and national governments for taking community-led development to scale? So I will turn to Amy, and let me know when you want your slides.
Okay. Thanks, John. I just want to give a shout out to John because honestly, if you want to know what single-mindedness can achieve, you just saw the slide up there with 42 organizations. I think John pretty much single-handedly has made that happen, which is a great testament to his focus around and real passion for this issue. And those 42 organizations up there, I can speak for my own organization, we share that passion in the way that we do our work and have been doing our work for 100 years. I work for the National Cooperative Business Association. CLUSA International is our international arm, and we started out 101 years ago, actually, and we come out of the cooperative movement, the worldwide cooperative movement, of which there are 1 billion members around the world. And cooperatives are all about ownership and about self-determination, autonomy, and basically a group of people coming together to form a business to serve the members of that business and to provide a service or product as a group. And so the cooperative business model kind of has, and the 7 principles that accompany that model, which are worldwide principles, you can find in cooperative movements around the world. That really sets a foundation for how we see development and how we've been doing development internationally. Well, we actually started in 1945 with the foundation of CARE, which was Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe. Just a small little factoid for you today.
Did everybody know that that's what CARE was?
Is it Cooperative for American Remittances to Europe, post-World War II. So I would like to share today a little bit about a way to answer this question. It's called the Citizen Working Group. I'm going to use the example of Senegal. We are, NCBA CLUSA is the prime for a very large integrated food security and nutrition program in Senegal with other partners, and we are coming now to the end of 7 years of that project. And I think one of the biggest successes of that is the focus on the importance of governance in food security and nutrition, and creating a process at the local level that people can use to truly lead their own development on around that issue. And so this is, you can pull that up, the Citizen Working Group model. Yeah, Citizen Working Group is essentially a local umbrella group. In Senegal, you have an administrative unit of the Communauté Rurale that's like a grouping of about 10, yeah, like a county level, 10 to 20 villages. And at that commune level, there is a grouping of all the different civil society organizations. They elect representatives at the village level in the individual villages to represent the village, and then they collectively gather at the commune level. And the purpose of that is really to serve as a civil society voice before local government, regional government, and national private sector actors to advocate for whatever the community's priorities are. And what we have found, it's really a platform to integrate all of the actors, but also, into different sectors, but also to integrate things like nutrition, healthcare, food production, water, gender, all of those issues horizontally. So it's a horizontal grouping, but it also articulates to local development plans, regional development plans, national development plans. And what's interesting about the Citizen Working Group is that it provides not only a voice for local community actors, and an inclusive voice because it includes youth, gender, women. It has all the different kinds of groups in it, farmer organizations, etc. Not only is it a voice, but it also provides a real structure for action. So one of the structural issues is to develop food security and nutrition plans in each commune and each village. So the villages have a representative for each of the 4 pillars of food security: availability, access, utilization, and governance. So they articulate their priorities through each of those lenses that carry it up to the commune level, the citizen working group. And on that basis, they're able to then articulate these food security and nutrition plans. And as I said, those plans get integrated into local development plans. So every year they create a work plan that is negotiated out with the members of the community, of the commune. And then I also want to say that women make up 50% of the participants of the activities around this plan. So there's a high level, and 30% of the leadership of the citizen working groups. So the only other thing I want to say at this time is there is a board of directors, so there's a real formalized structure. It's a board of directors that runs this citizen working group. And yeah, it's made up of representatives from the village steering committees. So it really is grassroots up. And it has been, the key role has really been to create demand at the community level for improved government services and government planning and government budgets, but also to be an entry point for a whole range of actors into the commune. So for example, if there's a drought, if there's some major crisis that happens and humanitarian actors need to enter in the community, or private sector wants to bring in services or products, or governments want to engage, or NGOs, the citizen working group is a point of entry that can then channel the community's priorities for that group coming in to engage with the community.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Rebecca Nelson, America Solidaria, and I'll back up my slides to your slides.
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and I want to reiterate the thanks to John as well in recognition for the Hunger Project and the role that it's played in really catalyzing this movement, giving it the character of a movement. So I'm actually going to be representing Latin American perspectives today, even though you might not think so. I'm actually the only gringa representative of what is essentially a fundamentally Latin American organization. So America Solidaria is an international nonprofit service organization, and it works to overcome the cultural and material foundations of poverty throughout the Americas. So we're a hemispheric organization that was founded in Santiago, Chile in 2002, and you can see some stars on the map there representing some of our geographic coverage in the region. And our overarching goal is to create a region where all children have what they need to grow, learn, and fulfill their full potential. So we work by mobilizing long-term professional fellows that have specific professional skills to lead capacity building projects with local organizations that are already working at a grassroots level in the areas of education, health, and income generation. So I want to share a little bit about the method that we use. It was actually developed by an Argentinian sociologist, Ruben Katzman. It's called the AVEO model, and in Spanish that stands for Activos, Vulnerabilidades y Estructuras de Oportunidades. So that would be assets, weaknesses, and opportunity structures. So you start off by analyzing a community's assets or resources, as well as their weaknesses or vulnerabilities. You want to figure out what they can draw from and the areas in which they might need to be lifted up a little bit in order to be able to be ready to take advantage of any opportunities that present themselves across the spectrum of human activity, essentially. And you also work directly with community members to strengthen these abilities and work with them to identify as well the areas in which they need strengthening. But that's only part of the puzzle, because you also need to look at the surrounding environment and identify what are the major institutions that are actually structuring the opportunities that are presented to people. And chief among them is government, local government, regional, national, or international government. And The AVEO method also includes civil society and the market or economy. And we might add another few key institutions as well in America Solidaria. We look to the church, academia, but those are the three major institutions that we try to work with in the AVEO method. So forging this connection between communities' needs and perspectives and institutions is essentially our model of community-led development. And so to illustrate how this AVEO method works in practice, let me give you an example of our migration projects in Chile. So we work with new migrants that have legally entered Chile but that lack support and access to a lot of resources, many of whom are from Haiti, Colombia, Peru. And we work with them to help them gain employment-seeking skills, but also to work with them so that they know their rights as well. In the Chilean labor context, we give them trainings on legal and illegal practices in hiring, for example. And that's all on the side of building community capacity, right? So we're trying to do everything that we can to work with this migrant community to get them as prepared as possible to seek employment and social inclusion. But then the other part of the equation is that we do advocacy and lobbying on behalf of migrants with local government, and we also partner with potential employers. So private corporations that are willing to raise their hand and commit to taking on a certain number of migrants and really making that philosophical commitment as well. So we work to prepare the environment to receive migrants as well. And I just want to share a quick example of how we've worked with the Chilean government to promote community-led development as well. So America Solidaria was a founding member of the Comunidad de Organizaciones Solidarias, the community of organizations in solidarity. And that's a network of over 200 civil society organizations in Chile that are working collaboratively to address some of the biggest issues that they've identified in society. And that includes America Solidaria, Hogar de Cristo, Fundación Superación de la Pobreza, all the major players in Chile. And through their advocacy and lobbying efforts, they've actually worked to get the Chilean government to redefine how it looks at and measures poverty. So it's shifted from measures of simple income generation to actually approaching poverty as a multidimensional issue. So the Chilean Ministry of Social Development now defines poverty as involving access to educational resources, housing, dignified work, social capital, networks, and other relevant social services as well. So in order to have that kind of national level impact, it's been really important for America Solidaria and this Comunidad to gain access to the technical advisory committees commissioned by the Chilean government. So our board president and our founder helped join those consultative spaces that ended up resulting in that redefinition of poverty. And we've also partnered with the network of young Chilean volunteers and Acción ONGs to develop a proposal for actually changing the Chilean constitution to shift it towards a more participatory democracy. It's currently a representative democracy, but there's more that could be done to build in spaces for community-based organizations. So I'll stop there.
Great, thanks Rebecca. So we've heard several roles of NGOs working with communities and with local and national governments in terms of planning, budgeting, advocacy. But at the end of the day, those local governments actually need money to do things. And if you've ever looked at the studies, you'll see that the percentage of funding that's actually spent at the community level in many developing countries is a very, very, very small percentage of public resources. And probably the organization that has the biggest portfolio of resources that are going directly into the hands of communities internationally is the CDD, portfolio that Susan and her team steward. So I want to ask the same question of you, Susan. How do you see NGOs working with governments to foster community-led development?
First of all, thank you, John, and the Hunger Project for inviting me. I think a few years ago, John came into my office. He was very persistent in meeting people at the World Bank, and we all thought, who is this NGO person who dares to come into the hallways of the World Bank and talk about community-led development? And I always learn a lot from our conversations with John. He's always been a very active member of a community of practitioners that we formed on community-driven development. And I think he's really on to something in terms of how the development community at large can look much more differently at transformational change. Okay, I agree with John that a lot of the aid agencies now move much more towards kind of sectoral, top-down approaches, but that's really not what villagers and poor people look. That's not the way they view development. They think of it as spatial dimension. They think of it as multi-dimensional poverty. They think of it in terms of how does assistance, how can we be active and have a voice in that development. So I think to the extent that John and the members of this movement have spearheaded that discussion to push that in the development community, I think that's always been very helpful. As John mentions, I lead a community of practice. In the World Bank, there's about 300 members of our community. Externally, there's about 800 people who are part of this network who are as committed as all of you, I'm sure, in talking about how communities can have a voice in decision making and making choices about how development can benefit them. The World Bank is a large financier of these programs. We work closely with other international financial institutions in about 78 countries with a active portfolio of about $17 billion right now. And it's generally about 5 to 10% of overall World Bank lending. Increasingly over the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of the other development banks such as Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank have all come to us also to join in this movement as well. So you have good partners, I think, on the financing side. It's actually funny, when I became involved in this community-driven development work, I think about 15 or so years ago, how I got involved was because I visited in East Asia several offices of NGOs trying to understand their projects. Okay, you start first by not just instructing to people how they should do development in their country, but actually finding out what's there already. And in many of these countries where community-driven development is the most strong are the ones that have been led by all of you. The ones that have started by all of you, I'm talking about grassroots development that are working in different parts of the country. So a lot of our World Bank staff actually look towards you and a lot of your members to say, okay, what's already happening in that country? What's the local knowledge, that micro data that will help inform the macro data? Okay, so a lot of our largest programs in the world, be it in Indonesia, Afghanistan, or other ones, have actually started because there were pilots with NGOs in those countries already operating. And we tried to look at that and see how you are organizing and planning, how you're mobilizing communities, how are you identifying the vulnerable, people who need assistance, and then how you're organizing them. Okay, so a lot of our foundations of our work to then transpose that work into government bureaucracy, frankly, has been led by all of you, has been modeled by all of you. The challenge in all these countries has really been how do we move to scale, I think as John was mentioning, right? So we have a lot of experience, not only just with the NGO community, but even in the World Bank where we have pilot projects. But then they have difficulty moving to scale. So how do you move from 26 villages to then hundreds of villages, thousands, to now one is 72,000 villages in Indonesia, for example. How do you move from, I think it was 100 villages or so in Afghanistan to now all 36,000 communities throughout the country? Okay, and a lot of that started with this kind of seed initiative of working together with NGOs and basically looking at how do they work with communities, what can we bring in on participatory planning and budgeting, and then implementation, okay, and then trying to scale that up. And I think the biggest challenges have really been around moving that model into a bureaucracy, which is quite different. Okay. John asked for some examples. I'm familiar with one in particular I worked on last year, Afghanistan. Many of you might know that program. It began in 2003 and called the National Solidarity Program. At that time, the government was looking for various models on how to reach out to communities post actually ongoing conflict. They started a program called National Solidaria Program, looking at groups that were already doing some of this work already in Afghanistan. People who have been there through the war and